Forge Master of Fuses. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 351 Original Intention. Jim Field and his men, relying on robbing merchant ships, completed the initial accumulation of funds, made great plans, and achieved absolute control over the Cheyenne Star region, and even extended their tentacles to the Cheyenne Star region, but died after achieving success. This is not in line with common sense. Unless there is a greater temptation than enjoying life in front of them. What kind of temptation can make them abandon their wealth and glory? At the same time, it can also make Tao Kingxi risk his life to find the whereabouts of Jim Field, Ulukami and Solomon Burke? Tang Fan touched his chin and fell into deep thought. Suddenly, a flash of inspiration came to his mind, and he thought of the eternal pursuit of mankind. Immortality. Tang Fan stared at Tao Kingxi's eyes and said word by word. As soon as these four words came out, Tao Kingxi's indifferent expression immediately cracked. Tang Fan knew that she had guessed right. Since the Qin Shi Huang of the Earth era, emperors and princes and nobles of all dynasties have been pursuing immortality. In the interstellar era, even though the average life expectancy has long reached 150 years, which is unattainable in the Earth era, it has not changed the pace of people's tireless pursuit. But no one can stop the passage of time. After thousands and tens of thousands of years of tireless pursuit, anti-aging drugs are still just a legend. All pharmacists, after entering the decline period, will more or less participate in the research of anti-aging drugs. This is a well-known fact in the Alliance. But Tang Fan did not expect that Jim Field's school would take a different approach and combine anti-aging drugs with genetic research, and even create a lot of mutant creatures. But the lifespan of sheath beetles is not long. The lifespan of sheath beetles is not long, but its physical level and fertility are countless times better than that of humans. Tao Kingxi's voice sounded, and Tang Fan was shocked to realize that he had actually said what was in his heart. So, the purpose of the Field Laboratories experiment is anti-aging drugs. Tao Kingxi nodded. At the beginning, it was indeed like this. That's right, but gradually, Field deviated from his research direction. The medicine made from sheath beetles is not particularly effective in anti-aging, but it greatly enhances the fertility of the experimental subjects, and can also enhance the physical fitness of the experimental subjects, especially physical fitness. And the general rule is, the higher the physical fitness level, the longer the lifespan. So, it is really hard to say whether Jim Field succeeded or failed. However, its creator, Professor Jim Field, can't use it. This kind of thing with extremely strong side effects can only be regarded as a failed experiment. Therefore, Jim Field threw them to Anna Smith without hesitation. Therefore, even if Jim Field dies, he will rush to new research. Therefore, Ulukami and Solomon Burke will continue to move forward. Now, it's the turn of Miss Tao Kingxi, who is desperate. Perhaps, there is also, she who just turned 30. Tang Fan, who finally figured out the taste, fell into hesitation for the first time. Tao Kingxi understood her difficulties, patted her on the shoulder, and said earnestly, I told you. You are still young and have a long way to go. You can go back the same way and pretend that this never happened. At this point, can you really pretend that nothing had happened? A trace of bitterness appeared on Tang Fan's face. Chapter 352, Settling for the Next Best. Tang Fan pressed his back teeth, silently opened a light brain, and sent a delayed email. If she never came back, all those clues, or evidence, that she thought were useful, would arrive in the hands of 3 people with this email in 15 days. Tang Yang, Song Si, and Qin Yi. The moment she clicked the confirmation button, a bitter look appeared on Tang Fan's face. She knew quite a few people, and quite a few of them were capable. But in the end, there were only these 3 people she could entrust and dared to entrust. But, this is enough. After making this little move, Tang Fan jumped up from the ground. Time is running out, let's continue. Tao Kingxi looked at Tang Fan in disbelief. However, in just a few minutes, Tang Fan clicked on the light brain a few times, quickly adjusted his state, and made a decision. Moreover, it was such a surprising decision. Such a change was too sudden. Also, it makes people feel uneasy. Miss Tang, have you thought it through? Tang Fan nodded. We have already taken the first 99 steps, so the last one won't matter. Tao Kingxi's mouth twitched. You were not like this just now. You looked hesitant, as if you would retreat if you disagreed. You made me nervous and said a lot of words to coax you. Now, all the little secrets I had hidden have been taken out by you, and you suddenly thought it through and became open-minded? Are you deliberately acting for me? Tang Fan touched his nose and laughed dryly. At the beginning, I was quite surprised and hesitant. In other words, Tang Fan was surprised and hesitant for a while at the beginning. As for later, don't ask. The question is, life depends on acting. Tao Kingxi is so smart that he understood Tang Fan's words at once. Looking at the little girl's palm-sized face, and then looking at the space buckle that gave her countless surprises, she took a deep breath. Asking for help is inferior. Endure. Don't mention the past. If you mention it again, I will be unable to resist the urge to beat you to death. Tang Fan obviously understood the other meaning in Tao Kingxi's words, and quickly put on a serious expression and restrained herself. Yes. It's important to do the right thing. Our next step, Miss Tao Kingxi knocked on the edge of the metal and smiled. Of course, turn this thing on. Tang Fan took out the metal detector from the space buckle, aimed it at the metal edge and turned it on. Miss Tang Fan, who never gave up easily, looked at the data on the metal detector and rarely admitted defeat. Although this thing is not wide, it is extremely heavy. It is impossible to open it. At least, tonight, it is impossible for you and me to do it. Miss Tao Kingxi gave her a look that said what's the use of you and said with a sigh, since it can't be opened, we can only settle for the next best thing and dig up the loose oil on it to reveal the true face of this thing. From opening this thing to revealing its true face, this step back is really big. Tang Fan looked at Tao Kingxi deeply, then took out the mechanical arm that he had just assembled from the space buckle and started to move. An expert can tell whether it is good or not with just one move. It took Tang Fan only half an hour to successfully achieve the goal set by Tao Kingxi. Looking at the familiar pattern on the strange metal in front of him, Tang Fan was stunned. Chapter 353 Teleportation Coordinate Matrix. Although the subject of starship driving is only one of Tang Fan's many minor majors, it does not mean that Tang Fan does not value it, nor does it mean that she is not good at her studies. Although it was magnified countless times, Tang Fan could still see at a glance that the familiar pattern on the metal was the teleportation coordinate matrix that starship pilots liked and hated the most. I like it because you will never get lost with it. I hate it because the side effects of using it are too great. How to say it? It's as if I have become a piece of rag, squeezed and twisted by this matrix, dizzy, nauseous, and weightless. Anyway, only those who have tasted it will never try it easily unless they have to. Isn't it nice to find the way by yourself? If it doesn't work, there are still temporary short-distance teleportation coordinates. But now, she only has this teleportation coordinate matrix that makes people love and hate it. No wonder it's so heavy. It turns out to be a teleportation coordinate matrix. Teleportation coordinate matrix? Although Tao Kingxi didn't recognize this thing, he had heard of its fierce reputation. Thinking about the side effects of the teleportation coordinate matrix, Tao Kingxi couldn't help but tremble. Are you sure? Tang Fan nodded. I can guarantee that this must be a teleportation coordinate matrix. However, I'm not sure where it leads to. Tao Kingxi looked at the complicated and beautiful curves on the metal and smiled bitterly. Where it leads to, does it matter? Yes. Regardless of whether this teleportation coordinate matrix connects to heaven or hell, she and Tao Kingxi have no choice. Forced to face reality, Tang Fan rubbed his back teeth, said nothing, and studied the teleportation coordinate matrix on his own. Tao Kingxi looked at Tang Fan, who was almost lying on the metal plate, and touched his nose with a dry smile. He was deeply sorry that he had once again killed the world. As a versatile and worldly woman, Tang Fan quickly found the activation device of this teleportation coordinate matrix based on her experience of reading tens of thousands of teleportation coordinate matrices. Fortunately, the device was working properly. Unfortunately, the activation device had no energy. Even more unfortunately, the energy quality required for this device was extremely high. 3 Super S-level energy stones. It's really embarrassing. Tang Fan searched all over her body, but only pulled out 2. Just when Tang Fan was scratching her head and thinking hard, a Super S-level energy stone came out from behind her. Looking at the big and plump Super S-level energy stone, Tang Fan felt that he could continue to chat with Ms. Tao Kingxi. Awkward chat is still chat? I just don't know how many topics to prepare for a full Super S-level energy stone. Tang Fan's mind was full of wild thoughts, but his hands never stopped. After the 3 Super S-level energy stones were placed in the appropriate positions in turn according to the rules summarized by Tang Fan, a soft white light slowly lit up. Looking at the light, Tang Fan couldn't help but curl up the corners of his mouth. She did it. She turned her head and looked at Tao Qingxi deeply, and said in a deep voice, "Are you ready?" Tao Qingxi swallowed her saliva and nodded firmly. Tang Fan took a deep breath, found a very strong rope made of star plants from her space buckle, and tied it firmly around their wrists. Everything was ready. And she finally pressed the button. Chapter 354 Destination. Instantly, the soft white light started from the button, and at a very fast speed, it followed a specific path and the curve of the transmission coordinate matrix. When the white light returned to the origin again, a black space gate slowly appeared in front of Tang Fan and Tao Qingxi. The two looked at each other, held each other's hands tightly, and walked towards the black space gate without hesitation. After the black space gate swallowed up the two figures, it quickly disappeared. When the patrol team of Shyan's Military Academy discovered the abnormality, they hurried over, but the suspect was no longer there. The suspect they could not find was now trapped in the endless darkness under the effect of the transmission coordinate matrix. Tao Qingxi, who was physically weak, only lasted less than a quarter of an hour before she closed her eyes due to the endless darkness, rotation, and jumping. Although Tang Fan was stronger than her, she only held on for an hour, and in the end, she still couldn't hold on. I don't know how long it took, accompanied by 2 muffled sounds of dong, dong. Tang Fan and Tao Qingxi were finally ruthlessly spitted to their destination by the transmission coordinate matrix. The huge pain in her back forced Tang Fan to wake up quickly. The bright sunlight made her blink involuntarily after being in the dark for a long time. Just when she wanted to raise her hand to block it, she found the special rope on her wrist and the woman who was still unconscious at the other end of the rope. Tang Fan gave up the idea of raising her hand and squinted her eyes while lying on the ground. After finally adapting to the light around her, she crawled towards Tao Qingxi. Thanks to the rope, the two of them were not too far away, and Tang Fan didn't have much effort to find Tao Qingxi. After confirming that Tao Qingxi was still breathing, Tang Fan breathed a sigh of relief. She first used a physical recovery potion on Tao Qingxi, and then gave herself one. When Tao Qingxi's breathing gradually stabilized, Tang Fan slowly untied the ropes tied around their wrists and looked around. Everywhere he looked, there was a yellow color. There was only yellow in the 4 wildernesses. It was all yellow. The sand is yellow, the basin is yellow, the plateau is yellow, the small river flowing from west to east is yellow, the whistling northwest wind is yellow, and even the sun in the sky is emitting orange light. Tang Fan glanced at his optical brain and did not find any star network signal, but saw the rapidly rising surface temperature on the optical brain. At this rate of increase, Tang Fan felt that if she did not think of a way, she would soon become human jerky. She looked at Tao Qingxi on the side, pushed her back teeth, and contributed 2 more physical recovery potions. With a blessing of 3 physical recovery potions, Tao Qingxi finally woke up. Seeing Tao Qingxi open his eyes, Tang Fan breathed a sigh of relief and shared his observations with his senior in a few words. Tao Qingxi, who had just woken up and had figured out who he was and where he was dragged by Tang Fan and embarked on a difficult journey of survival. Following Tang Fan's instructions, they followed the direction of the river and walked eastward for nearly 10 miles. They finally found a naturally formed cave. They couldn't wait to crawl in. Looking at the rising surface temperature on the light brain and listening to the whistling northwest wind, they were both silent. Regret? Probably a little. But they had no way out now. Chapter 355 Sand Python. Tao Qingxi sighed. We are both on the same boat, so there is no need to hide many things. As she said that, she simply spread out all the things in her space buckle. 50% were various kinds of medicines, 30% were some survival supplies, and the other 20% should be pharmaceutical equipment, which Tang Fan did not know and was not interested in. Since Tao Qingxi was frank, Tang Fan did not need to hide anything. She also revealed the things in her space buckle. Unlike Tao Qingxi, Tang Fan did not have many survival supplies and medicines, only about 30%. 30% were various energy sources, and the remaining 40%, which Tao Qingxi did not understand and was not interested in. Looking at Tang Fan's few survival supplies, Tao Qingxi's face turned black. For the first time, she doubted the correctness of choosing Tang Fan as a teammate. Tang Fan saw Tao Qingxi's displeasure, but she did not say anything. She just used the 40% of things that Tao Qingxi did not understand to piece together, knock and bang, and made an insulation pad. Sitting on the heat-insulating pad that Tang Fan had made, Tao Qingxi could only swallow her dissatisfaction. When the sun gradually set, Tang Fan used the pile of things in her hand to successfully distill drinking water from the yellow river water, and the dissatisfaction in Tao Qingxi's heart completely disappeared. No matter when and where, drinking water is still an indispensable resource for humans. Just based on Tang Fan's ability to get water, Tao Qingxi had to admit it. As for how he got the water, she didn't understand, and didn't want to understand. During the day, this yellow planet, except for the whistling of the northwest wind, there was no other sound. But when the light blue moon slowly rose, Tang Fan and Tao Qingxi realized that this yellow planet was not as quiet and peaceful as they imagined. As the temperature dropped, a rustling sound suddenly sounded around. Tang Fan, who was fiddling with distilled water, put away his tools at the first time and stared at the direction where the sound came from. Soon, a group of pythons more than 2 meters long, covered with tiny scales, reddish-brown bodies, and covered with black-brown horizontal stripes, emerged from the surrounding sands in groups. Even a brave man like Tang Fan couldn't help but gasp. On the contrary, Miss Tao Qingxi, who was a weakling in combat, observed carefully and said calmly, "This is a black-spotted sand python. Adult snakes feed on gerbils, lizards and birds, and young snakes feed on insects. It is non-toxic and does not have much medicinal value." Hearing that this thing is non-toxic, Tang Fan's nervous heart relaxed a little bit. Although they are not poisonous, I still think that it is not a pleasant thing to live in the same room with them. Looking at Tang Fan's frowning brows and thinking about her few drinking water, Miss Tao Qingxi suppressed her smile and took out an insect repellent from the space buckle and gently sprinkled it around the insulation layer. Tao Qingxi is indeed a genius among geniuses. As soon as the potion landed, the densely packed sand pythons around her disappeared immediately. Without the sand pythons, Tang Fan did not relax her vigilance. She pricked up her ears, listened carefully to the sound around her, and said faintly, "It seems that we must adjust our work and rest time, Ms." Tao Qingxi had no doubts about this. Chapter 356 Fear of Snakes. Listening to the noises around them and distinguishing the species around them, Tang Fan and Tao Qingxi persisted even though they were exhausted. It was not until the yellow sun gradually replaced a blue moon and the sand pythons and other animals gradually stopped fighting that Tang Fan breathed a sigh of relief. "You've worked hard all day, senior, can you take a nap first?" Tao Qingxi did not give in, and said directly, "I'll take your place in 2 hours." After that, he fell asleep without hesitation. Tang Fan smiled and said nothing, but just took out the water purification equipment in his space buckle and continued to tinker with it. After tinkering for 3 rounds, seeing that all the containers that could hold water on his body were installed, Tang Fan's tense nerves finally relaxed a little. As a child from a planet with scarce water resources, as long as there is water, Tang Fan has the confidence to continue to live. After putting away her own things, she put most of the drinking water into the full space buckle, and the rest was placed by her in an orderly manner next to Tao Qingxi. Looking at Tao Qingxi's sleeping face, Tang Fan was reluctant to wake her up. Of course, she was also worried about leaving herself to Tao Qingxi, a weakling. In order to sleep peacefully in the face of various creatures, Tang Fan took action again. Based on the heat insulation board under her body, plus the memory metal she dug from Laobu a few years ago, and the high-hardness metal synthesized with mutant biological materials provided by Mr. Li Bangsha, Tang Fan forcibly covered her and Tao Qingxi with a metal cage. Tang Fan clapped his hands in satisfaction. Unexpectedly, the slight noise actually woke up Tao Qingxi from her sleep. Tao Qingxi glanced at her light brain, couldn't help frowning, and complained in a low voice, "Didn't I tell you to call me in 2 hours? It's been 3.5 hours." Tang Fan glanced at the drinking water beside Tao Qingxi, patted the railing beside him, and explained, "I was busy with the work in my hands and didn't pay attention to the time for a while." Tao Qingxi only then noticed the huge changes around him. Looking at the drinking water beside her, which was enough for the 2 of them to drink for 3 days, and then looking at the metal cages beside her and above her head, Tao Qingxi couldn't help but sigh. "You are quite good at finding things to do for yourself. If I don't wake up myself, what are you going to do next?" Tang Fan touched his chin and thought for a while. Maybe, it's possible, make a pot of snake soup for the 2 of us. She saw with her own eyes that many sand pythons burrowed into the sand near them at dawn. Even if she didn't like this kind of animal, she couldn't help but make do with it when food was scarce. After all, human life is more important than anything else. Tao Qingxi couldn't help but frown when she heard this. As a pharmacist, countless small animals died at her hands, but she didn't have any concerns about not being able to do it, and she didn't reject catching snakes. Although she didn't like snake soup, she wouldn't refuse it under such circumstances. The only thing that made her embarrassed was that she couldn't do it. Can we change the recipe from snake soup to snake-flavored supplements? Tang Fan couldn't help but shudder when he heard this. I think colorless and tasteless supplements will be more popular than those with snake flavor. Tang Fan's words were quite tactful, but he still succeeded in making Miss Tao Qingxi laugh. The fearless Tang Fan, the head of the sect, was actually afraid of snakes. Chapter 357, Snake Feast. Tang Fan could only pretend not to see Tao Qingxi's constantly shrugging shoulders, and closed his eyes, pretending to be asleep. After staying up all night, Tang Fan was really tired. One careless moment, the fake act became real, and he really fell asleep. But Tang Fan was a person who climbed up from the bottom after all, and even in this extremely tired situation, he always remained vigilant. Tao Qingxi looked for sand pythons, lured sand pythons with drugs, captured sand pythons, and made nutrient supplements. Step by step, Tang Fan always knew everything clearly. Fell asleep? Not possible. At least not on this situation. Tao Qingxi's pharmaceutical technology is naturally beyond doubt. In the 3.5 hours that Tang Fan was asleep, Tao Qingxi made a full 100 nutrient supplements. If it weren't for the lack of containers, this guy's production could have doubled. Tao Qingxi followed Tang Fan's example and placed the nutrient supplements neatly next to Tang Fan. When Tang Fan opened his eyes, looked at the row of nutrient supplements around him, and thought about their origins, his expression was particularly wonderful. What does it mean to be red and white, black and red, and not very black? Tao Qingxi finally understood. The wisdom of our ancestors. Looking at Miss Tao Qingxi's little expression of infinite emotion, Tang Fan couldn't help but twitch the corners of his mouth. This girl is just a little disgusted, but it doesn't mean that this girl is scared, okay? Tang Fan glanced at the sand pythons that Miss Tao Qingxi had not yet fully utilized, and decided to show her real skills. Grilled sand pythons, stir-fried sand pythons, wine-flavored sand pythons, pepper and salt sand pythons, ginger and oil sand pythons, snake soup. A large table full of dishes fully proved that although Tang Fan was disgusted by sand pythons, he was not afraid. Seeing Tang Fan's raised chin, Miss Tao Qingxi smiled brightly. Look at this big table of delicious food, you've worked so hard. However, I haven't eaten this whole snake feast either. Chef Tang, can you show me how to make it? Tang Fan couldn't help but clench his fists, and stared at Tao Qingxi with his beautiful eyes, as if saying, damn it. You're making things difficult for me, fat tiger. Tao Qingxi couldn't help but burst out laughing. What does it mean to be strong on the outside but weak on the inside, and to be fierce on the outside but weak on the inside? She finally understood today. Okay. I won't make things difficult for you. The whole snake feast belongs to me, and the nutrient is yours. When I find other raw materials, I'll find a way to change a batch for you. Tang Fan silently loosened his clenched fists and breathed a long sigh of relief. The whole snake feast and this batch of nutrient are yours. I'll just wait for the next batch of nutrient. Listening to the noise last night, there are many other animals on this yellow planet besides the sand python. As long as it's not a sand python, Tang Fan feels that she can accept it. No one is perfect, and no gold is pure. She, Tang Fan, is afraid of snakes. So what? Cold body, long teeth, red tongue, strong fishy smell. It's normal to be afraid of such things, and it's abnormal not to be afraid. Besides, human beings' fear of snakes is engraved in their genes. Since knowing snakes, humans know that snakes are dangerous animals. Because snakes can cause fatal harm to people, a defense mechanism will be formed in the subconscious. Therefore, fear of snakes is a self-protection behavior of people. She is definitely not an exception. Absolutely not. Thinking of this, Tang Fan suddenly felt at ease. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 358 Itachi. Tang Fan is not the only one who is afraid of snakes, and Tao Qingxi is definitely not the only one who sees sand pythons as delicious. A table full of snake feasts, Miss Tao Qingxi actually ate them all by herself, leaving only a table of bones. Looking at the table of snake bones, Tang Fan couldn't help but twitch the corners of her mouth. Even if Tao Qingxi was thick-skinned, she couldn't help blushing in the face of this scene. She hurriedly cleaned up the mess, put the snake bones, snake skins, internal organs, and pharmaceutical residues into a bag and sealed it. When it's a little cooler, let's find a place to bury these things. Tang Fan didn't say anything, but nodded silently. It was noon, the hottest time of the day. There was silence all around, only the sound of the northwest wind. This kind of hot and quiet environment is most likely to induce people's sleepiness. If you stay up late, the effect will be even more obvious. Look, Tang Fan and Tao Qingxi had only been sitting for a quarter of an hour, but Tao Qingxi had already yawned several times. If you feel sleepy, senior, just sleep for a while. Anyway, you're free anyway. Tao Qingxi looked up at her, thought for a while, and nodded. Okay. I'll sleep for a while, and then it's your turn. Tang Fan smiled and said nothing. To Tang Fan's surprise, Tao Qingxi really only slept for a while this time. But in less than half an hour, Tao Qingxi got up and insisted on taking turns with Tang Fan. Tang Fan couldn't resist, so he could only close his eyes and rest for a while. To be honest, in such a hot noon, even if you squint for a while, you will be much more energetic. What's more, Tang Fan stayed up all night and didn't get a good night's sleep. After squint for a while, she felt much better. Miss Tang Fan, who was full of energy, thought much faster than usual. After consulting Miss Tao Qingxi, she used only half an afternoon to make 2 crossbows with the materials at hand. After teaching Miss Tao Qingxi how to use this ancient weapon and successfully hunting a black-spotted tiger weasel, Tang Fan finally breathed a sigh of relief. In addition to feeling that he finally had a chance to sleep well, Tang Fan also saw the possibility of finding plants on this yellow planet from this rodent-eating animal. This also means that they have more possibilities to survive. Deal with the weasel on the spot and bury the discarded parts together with the domestic garbage they created. Tang Fan and Tao Qingxi's work for the day was basically completed. Once again retreated to the cave and waited for the night to fall. Tang Fan and Tao Qingxi listened to the various sounds made by the animals around them, and their hearts were calm. They were even interested in making plans for tomorrow. After careful consideration, both parties decided to use the entire day tomorrow to catch up on sleep. The morning was for Tao Qingxi, and the afternoon was for Tang Fan. As for lunch, Tao Qingxi strongly requested Tang Fan to have another full snake feast. Of course, if there is no full snake feast, Miss Tao Qingxi can accept the full weasel feast. In this regard, Tang Fan showed resistance from the inside out. The two sides launched a fierce debate. Tang Fan is a businessman, and compared with Ms. Tao Qingxi, a researcher, he is undoubtedly more eloquent. Ms. Tao Qingxi was no match for her opponent. And her lunch was forced to change from a full snake feast and a full weasel feast to colorless and tasteless special nutrient. Specialties of the yellow planet, specially made by sand pythons, without any additives and toxic side effects. As for whether it is worth it for you, it depends on your own opinion. Chapter 359 Yuan and Shuo. After eating and resting, Tang Fan began to think about how to scout the spot on the shortest time. Scouting the spot was not a difficult task for Tang Fan. But it was hard to say if he brought along the scumbag Ms. Tao Qingxi. To Tang Fan's surprise, when she heard that she was going to scout the spot, Ms. Tao Qingxi was more excited than she was. Maybe, it was possible that she didn't really want to be neighbors with a group of sand pythons? Or maybe, she had eaten too much meat, and she wanted to change her taste and eat some fruits and vegetables. Anyway, she had to bring them along, so Tang Fan didn't think too much about it. With Tao Qingxi, Tang Fan couldn't walk too far. Tang Fan didn't bother too much. He took his homemade telescope and climbed a nearby high ground with Tao Qingxi. Looking up, there was an endless high ground formed by the erosion of flowing water. These high grounds were terrace-shaped, with steep sides and flat tops, like beautiful petals. Tang Fan had seen this kind of terrain in the notes of the ancestors of the Zhao family. The ancestors of the Zhao family called it Yuan. And this planet should be called Yuanxing by the ancestors of the Zhao family. Tang Fan recalled the description of this planet by the ancestors of the Zhao family, and he took a breath of cold air. This planet, named Yuanxing by the ancestors of the Zhao family, has a terrain that slopes from northwest to southeast. Except for many rocky mountains, most of it is covered with thick layers of loess. After long-term and strong erosion by flowing water, a special natural landscape with thousands of gullies and fragmented terrain has gradually formed. However, since some time ago, the loess with fine particles, soft soil, and rich mineral nutrients has been replaced by sand, which is no longer suitable for the growth and development of plants. As a result, the herbivores of the entire Yuanxing must rely on the fruits of the wind-rolled trees blown from the Shuaxing by the northwest wind on the new moon day. There is no need to think about fruits, vegetables, etc. And the rare minerals of the ancestors of the Zhao family are really available on this planet, and there are quite a few. However, they are all some common mineral products, among which aluminum ore accounts for the absolute majority. Unfortunately, Tang Fan is not the ancestor of the Zhao family. Compared to the inedible and inedible ore, Tang Fan prefers things that can be eaten and drunk. Perhaps, Shuaxing, which can provide food for the herbivores of Yuanxing, would be a better choice? Tang Fan narrowed his eyes and made a decision silently. We must move. Miss Tao Qingxi looked at her in confusion. Move? Where to move? Tang Fan turned her back to the direction where the pale blue moon came out, and pointed casually. There. Tao Qingxi looked at her casually, and couldn't help but twitching his mouth. Are you sure? Tang Fan nodded. I'm sure, although he didn't know what Tang Fan was talking about. As a scumbag, Tao Qingxi looked at the animals around him who were ready to move, and made concessions wisely. Then, can we move tomorrow? Tang Fan nodded, grabbed Tao Qingxi's sleeve, and jumped onto a metal plate. She stepped slightly, and the two of them slid towards the bottom of the valley like arrows from a bow. A shrill female voice passed through the sky above Yuanxing. Tang Fan pressed his back teeth and slightly exerted force with his heels. The metal plate immediately lifted up and stopped. Tao Qingxi's screams finally stopped. However, Tang Fan's eyes became more complicated. Tang Fan pretended not to see it, put away the metal plate, took a few quick steps, and entered the cave where they were temporarily living. Being bullied by a junior, and unable to say anything, what should I do? Waiting online, very urgent. Chapter 360 Northwest. After confirming the itinerary, Tang Fan gave Tao Qingxi a task, replenishing her energy. In layman's terms, it was to sleep. Tao Qingxi looked at Tang Fan with resentment, but still closed her eyes amid the noises made by various animals. Ms. Tao Qingxi underestimated herself. After climbing up the hill and being frightened on the way back, she thought she would not be able to fall asleep, but she snored a little after a while. If Tang Fan hadn't yelled and pushed her, she might not have woken up. Looking at the orange-yellow sun still on the horizon, and then looking at the surroundings where there was nothing except the heat insulation board under her body, Tao Qingxi couldn't help blushing. It would be fine if she slept all night, but she didn't even know when Tang Fan packed up his things, and this was over. Tang Fan didn't give her time to make an excuse. He put away the heat insulation board, took out the rope made of star plans, tied their wrists, and took Tao Qingxi with him, following the direction of the water flow, against the northwest wind, and walked forward. This walk lasted 2 hours. Just when Tao Qingxi was about to give up, they finally found another cave and stopped. As soon as the insulation pad was put down, Tao Qingxi pounced on it without any image. It was not that she was pretending to be dead, but she was such a weakling that her legs were already sore after walking for 2 hours. The physical recovery potion could alleviate this problem. But in this place where everything is available, and the potion is running out, she dared not use it even though she had the potion. Who knows what will happen next? If she and Tang Fan died because of the lack of a physical recovery potion, she would not be willing to accept it even if she became a ghost. So, even if she was grimacing in pain, Tao Qingxi just lay there in an ugly posture. Seeing Tao Qingxi's unbearable pain, Tang Fan sighed silently. She quickly did the protective work, resignedly pulled Tao Qingxi's leg over, and massaged her. Tao Qingxi was stunned for a moment, then relaxed and said with a smile, "It is a rare peak moment in my life to be served by Master Tang personally. It's a pity that I can't show it off to others." Tang Fan thought about the notebook left by the ancestors of the Zhao family in his space, and whispered, "It's possible. What if, one day, we find what we want?" Tao Qingxi looked at the yellow oil above his head and said nothing. The atmosphere suddenly became solemn. Tang Fan seemed not to feel it, and patted Tao Qingxi's leg. "It's almost done. Change to the other side." Tao Qingxi blinked her eyes, barely retracted the mist under her eyes, and then changed her posture and put her other leg next to Tang Fan's hand. Under Tang Fan's moderate massage, Miss Tao Qingxi, who was overworked, fell asleep again. When she woke up again, it was already 2 hours later. Looking at the dark blue under Tang Fan's eyes, Tao Qingxi couldn't help feeling guilty. She silently took out a crossbow prepared by Tang Fan and laughed dryly. "I'll watch it for you, you take the time to rest." Tang Fan did not refuse, and reluctantly drank 2 nutrient supplements, then lay on the insulation pad and closed his eyes. After working so hard for so long, Tang Fan finally took a break, and she fell asleep accidentally. Even if it was only for a short while, she couldn't help but feel a chill on her back. She overestimated herself. Fortunately, nothing happened. Chapter 361 Shuozing. Tang Fan and Tao Qingxi did not stay in this temporary base for too long. When the sun was about to set, the two of them set out again and continued to move northwest. Tang Fan's decision was right. The further northwest they went, the less harsh the environment was, and the more diverse the animal species became. They even saw some wind-rolling tree fruits that had not been eaten clean. The fruit of the wind-rolling tree is different from the fruit of ordinary plants. First of all, it is big. The white wind-rolling tree fruit with a diameter of 2 meters is eye-catching wherever it is. Secondly, it is light. Although it is 2 meters in diameter, it is hollow. Even a scum like Tao Qingxi can lift one with one hand. When Tang Fan saw these fruits, it was like seeing her own mother. No, it was closer than seeing her own mother. After all, she had no feelings for Tang Mang, but she had deep feelings for the fruit of the wind-rolling tree. After all, if small animals can eat it, she can eat it too. From then on, she no longer had to succumb to the nutrients made by the sand python. Great news. Good or not? Ms. Tao Qingxi even looked at Tang Fan thoughtfully and asked, "Did you decide to come to the northwest for this?" Tang Fan denied it, of course. Tao Qingxi looked at her doubtfully, tutted, and said nothing. As for what he was thinking in his heart, no one knew. Even with the fruit of the wind-rolling tree, Tang Fan still did not give up the pace of moving forward to the northwest. After a period of exercise, Ms. Tao Qingxi actually got used to such a schedule. From falling on the insulation pad without caring about her image tomorrow to barely holding on, Ms. Tao Qingxi's physical fitness has actually improved significantly. Tang Fan no longer worries about this guy dragging his feet. In this way, they rushed for more than 10 days, until they saw the white planet dotted with green marks in front of them, and Tang Fan slowed down a little. It was not until this time that Tao Qingxi believed that Tang Fan forced him to go to the northwest, not just to avoid touching the nutrients made by the sand python. As a pharmacist, Tao Qingxi was much more excited when she saw the plants than Tang Fan, who made mechas. Tao Qingxi, who didn't have time to rest, pulled Tang Fan's sleeve and kept telling him about the knowledge of the wind-tumble tree. Her eagerness to go to the next door Shuo star was beyond words. Tang Fan looked at her madness with cold eyes, and after a long while, he told her coldly, "No way, the space buckle not only has a limited volume, but also a limited number of things it can carry." Tang Fan was able to take 2 space buckles out, which was already a first-class physical performance. The things in one of them were used to hold the things that were shown to Tao Qingxi. For the sake of safety, the other space buckle was used to hold the mecha that Tang Fan had tailored for him. The mecha was okay for short-distance movement, but it was not guaranteed for long distances. Even if Tang Fan didn't hesitate to use the mecha, the energy boxes he could carry were limited. Now the situation was unclear, and Tang Fan didn't dare to mess around. Find the point where the tumbleweed fruit is most dense, and migrate on the new moon day when the distance between the 2 planets is the shortest, which is the most energy-saving. The businessman's calculations were crackling. Tao Qingxi thought for a moment and said weakly, "But at that time, the northwest wind is also the strongest. If we drive in the opposite direction," Tang Fan curled his lips and sneered, "so, we must complete this task before the northwest wind starts. If we fail to seize the opportunity, we will have to wait until the next new moon day." The picture was so beautiful that Tao Qingxi couldn't help but shudder. Chapter 362, Rolling Tree. Realizing the seriousness of the matter, Tao Qingxi became extremely cooperative, and even increased the speed of the journey a little bit. Tang Fan was very pleased with this. In view of Miss Tao Qingxi's great cooperation, Tang Fan successfully completed his plan and successfully completed this migration on the day of the new moon, before the northwest wind started. As soon as Tang Fan and Tao Qingxi landed, the northwest wind suddenly blew. Countless white wind-rolling tree fruits, along with the northwest wind, floated towards Yuanxing. The wind-rolling tree fruits fluttered in the wind, which was so beautiful that people couldn't take their eyes away. It was an encounter between wind and tree, and it was also the hope for all animals in Yuanxing to survive. Tang Fan and Tao Qingxi stood in place, staring at the beautiful scenery in front of them. Unfortunately, this beautiful scene only lasted for a mere hour. When the new moon rotated, the northwest wind deviated from the wind-rolling forest, and the white bond between Yuanxing and the new moon was finally broken. At this moment, only the trunk of the wind-rolling tree was left on the new moon. The branches of the wind-rolling trees were emerald green and slender, with almost no leaves. They stood on the ground like green pillars, looking quite creepy. The few fruits that were not blown away by the northwest wind were like hats, covering their heads, like a huge mushroom. Tang Fan picked 2 wind-rolling trees whose fruits were not blown away, cut a hole in each trunk, and tied the hammock to them steadily. This place is much safer than Yuanxing. It's getting dark, and while the star beasts haven't appeared yet, let's recover some physical strength first. Miss Tao Qingxi agreed with Tang Fan's suggestion. The two of them drank 2 nutrient supplements each, and then they fell asleep on the hammock with their heads facing each other. Tang Fan was worried about the safety of the 2 people, so he didn't sleep very well. He just closed his eyes for a while and jumped off the hammock. Jumping off the same hammock, even if Tang Fan deliberately slowed down his movements, the movement was not small. But Miss Tao Qingxi was unaware of it and did not move at all. Tang Fan was full of admiration for Miss Tao Qingxi's ability to fall asleep as soon as she touched the bed, not to get up unless called, and not to get enough sleep after sleeping for more than 30 years. And she was born to be a hard worker, so she should accept her fate. Shuoxing is safer than Yuanxing, but it does not mean that the two of them can rest assured on Shuoxing. If the danger of Yuanxing lies in the various star beasts, then the danger of Shuoxing lies in its weird weather. It is still good when there are many winds on the new moon, but if there is a thunderstorm. Tang Fan looked at Tao Qingxi, who was sleeping soundly on the hammock, and could not help shuddering. The most urgent task is to collect supplies. Those wind-rolling tree fruits that have not been blown away by the northwest wind, or those wind-rolling tree fruits that have not yet matured, are currently the best materials for making nutrients. The second thing is to find a safe shelter. Ms. Tao Qingxi, who is a scum in the battle, is not as tough as her. Thinking about Ms. Tao Qingxi's physical strength, Tang Fan smiled bitterly and shook his head, resigned to his fate, and packed up his things, ready to climb the tree. There was no other way. Who let the teammates be chosen by themselves? What else can be done? Of course, accept a fate. When Tang Fan got the 9th wind-rolling tree fruit, Miss Tao Qingxi finally stretched and sat up. Seeing Tang Fan swaying on the top of the wind-rolling tree, a rare flash of embarrassment flashed across Miss Tao Qingxi's face. Feeling guilty, Miss Tao Qingxi quickly jumped off the hammock, set up her posture, and made nutritional supplements. Although Miss Tao Qingxi's fighting ability is a bit sluggish, her strength in pharmaceutical preparation is really amazing. In just 3/4 of an hour, she caught up with Tang Fan's speed in collecting wind-rolling tree fruits. The ground was full of various containers of nutritional supplements. Estimating that the nutritional supplements were enough for about a month, Tang Fan looked at the sky and finally slid down from the wind-rolling tree. Chapter 363, Rolling Tree. Seeing Tang Fan sliding down from the tree, Miss Tao Qingxi knew that her mission for today was basically completed. Tao Qingxi was packing up her set of tools slowly and was about to speak when she saw Tang Fan doing a spinning kick at the tumble tree in front of her. With a muffled crack, the thick trunk of the tumble tree broke at the root and fell down quickly with Tang Fan on its back. Tang Fan stepped forward and caught the trunk in time and gently put it on the ground. Tao Qingxi's throat tightened and she asked nervously, "What do you mean by this?" Although Tang Fan knew that Tao Qingxi had thought about something else, he did not explain. He just took out a short knife from his space buckle and waved it quickly. Tang's knife skills were naturally excellent. Even with a short knife, Tang Fan wielded it vigorously. Ms. Tao Qingxi had no intention of appreciating it, for fear that the short knife would be blind and fall on her. In fact, Ms. Tao Qingxi was overthinking. The short knife in Tang Fan's hand was not meant to be wielded for fun. Tang Fan had a purpose for every point where the dagger landed. When she put away the dagger, Tao Qingxi discovered that the emerald green and straight wind-rolling tree at her feet had turned into several equal pieces of wood. Each piece of wood was about 2 meters long and slightly taller than Tang Fan when standing up. Tao Qingxi looked at the pile of wood blocks. Although she knew that Tang Fan had played a trick on her again, her expression relaxed a little. "What do you want to do?" Tang Fan did not say anything, but slowly cut each piece of wood into a long stick with a thin tip. When the first finished product came out, Tang Fan could not help but try it out. This wooden stick with a special shape was wielded by Tang Fan with great vigor. It can be used as a long stick or a spear. It is of moderate size and weight, and Tang Fan is very satisfied. But the durability of this thing is not enough. However, Tang Fan does not dislike it. She made more than 20 pieces in one go, just in case. Tang Fan did not waste the remaining scraps. He cut them into a lot of small wooden cones and put them all in his bag. They were very convenient to use as hidden weapons. Tang Fan originally wanted to make a bow and arrow to increase her long-range attack power. Unfortunately, she was not good at drawing a bow and shooting arrows. She could not find a bowstring for a while, so Tang Fan had no choice but to give up. Patting the sawdust on his body, Tang Fan looked at the sky, sighed, and simply carried Miss Tao Qingxi to climb up a tumble tree with a hat on it. When the afterglow of the setting sun gradually sank into the horizon and the silver moon slowly rose, Miss Tao Qingxi had successfully climbed to the top of the tumble tree. Tang Fan simply cut off half of the tumble tree fruit and placed Miss Tao Qingxi in it. Looking at the tumble tree fruit like a bird's nest under her, Miss Tao Qingxi couldn't help but twitch her lips. "It's more than 10 meters high. It won't kill anyone, will it?" Tang Fan glanced at her, silently took out a handful of wire from his space buckle, fixed the tumble tree fruit firmly on the trunk, and then took out a therapeutic device and waved it. Miss Tao Qingxi snorted and closed her eyes. "Since you can't resist, just enjoy it." Miss Tao Qingxi's mentality is great. Looking at Miss Tao Qingxi who fell asleep again, Tang Fan shook his head helplessly, and slowly fixed the half of the tumble tree fruit that he had just cut above Tao Qingxi. Tang Fan made a nest for himself on the tumble tree next door. Then, he watched over Miss Tao Qingxi who was sleeping until dawn. Chapter 364 Brown Wolf. The next morning, when Miss Tao Qingxi yawned, stretched, and pushed open the fruit of the tumble tree that Tang Fan had closed for her, she was stunned by the scene in front of her. Her throat rolled, and thousands of words merged into a shocking cry. Often Tang Fan rubbed his ears and said, "I'm not deaf. I'm not blind." Therefore, she saw the group of brown wolves under the tumble tree clearly, and truly, without any special reminder. Even if the brown wolves were pulling at the tumble tree and roaring non-stop, Tao Qingxi, who was smart, also understood Tang Fan's subtext. With the idea that it is better to ask for help from oneself than to ask for help from others, Tao Qingxi trembled with both hands and pulled up her own space buckle. When she finally pulled out the paralysis potion, Tang Fan had already taken a step ahead and started to work. The wooden cone made yesterday evening suddenly appeared in Tang Fan's hand, turned into a stream of light, and pointed directly at the throat of the wolf leader. With a muffled sound of a sharp weapon piercing the throat, the wolf leader who was ready to attack fell to the ground. The brown-red blood soon wet the hair on the wolf leader's throat and reflected the red soil under it. Tao Qingxi looked at the wolf leader whose limbs were still twitching and swallowed silently. Her teammates were in awe, and as an enemy more sensitive than humans, the brown wolf's reaction was simpler and more direct. They hesitated for only a moment before abandoning the body of the wolf leader and running away. The ability to seek benefits and avoid harm was beyond the reach of Miss Tao Qingxi. 3 meters, 5 meters. Tao Qingxi didn't breathe a sigh of relief until the wolf pack completely disappeared from her sight. It was not until this time that Tao Qingxi realized that her hands were full of sweat. She wiped them on her protective suit secretly, and looked at Tang Fan and asked weakly, "It's so high, how can I get down?" Tang Fan sighed, and the wooden cone in his hand flew out again. However, this time the target was not the brown wolf, but the wind-rolling tree where Tao Qingxi lived. Tao Qingxi felt sick when she heard the sound of the wooden spike hitting the tree trunk. "What are you doing?" Tang Fan raised his eyebrows and said with a smile, "I'm building a ladder for you." Tao Qingxi looked at the two tree trunks facing each other like wooden ladders, and her mouth twitched. A line of words was clearly written in her eyes. "Are you sure this is not a show of power?" "Of course, yes. But will Tang Fan admit it?" "Impossible. Not in this lifetime." Tang Fan, who felt a little guilty, slid down the rolling tree at lightning speed, picked up the dead wolf, and dealt with it slowly. When Tang Fan had dealt with a wolf, Miss Tao Qingxi still couldn't get down from the ladder Tang Fan had built for her. Looking at Miss Tao Qingxi's clumsy appearance, Tang Fan sighed deeply and resigned himself to carrying Miss Tao back to the embrace of Mother Earth. The first breakfast that Tang Fan and Tao Qingxi had on Shuoxing was still a nutritional supplement. There is no way Miss Tao Qingxi can't eat wolf meat raw. Anyone who has tried it knows how it feels to look at the meat but not be able to eat it. Apart from anything else, Miss Tao Qingxi's eyes were as green as the wolf's when she looked at the wolf meat. Seeing Miss Tao Qingxi's greed for meat, Tang Fan felt funny. He took out a metal plate from the space buckle, cleaned it, and put it on the ground. Then, slice the processed wolf meat into thin slices, sprinkle a thin layer of salt on it, and wait for time and the sun to cast magic on them. The first breakfast that Tang Fan and Tao Qingxi had on Shuoxing was no longer a nutritional supplement, but a roasted wolf meat slice with the flavor of Shuoxing. This touched Miss Tao Qingxi so much. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 365 Cloud. After having a good meal and a good drink, Miss Tao Qingxi looked at the towering wind-rolling trees, dusted herself off, and resigned herself to grabbing the protruding wooden spikes. But before she could climb up, she was stopped by Tang Fan. No need to climb up, we won't stay here tonight. Tao Qingxi stared at Tang Fan blankly, and asked in confusion, if not here, where should we stay? Tang Fan pointed to the towering green mountains in the distance, and said with a smile, there. Looking at the towering green mountains, Tao Qingxi couldn't help swallowing. Do you know the old saying, if you look at the mountain, you will die if you run your horse to death? Tang Fan glanced at her, pointed at the gradually accumulating clouds not far away, and sneered, then do you know what it means that there are unpredictable changes in the weather? Miss Tao Qingxi looked at the mountain, then at the clouds, and finally resigned herself to helping Tang Fan pack up the roasted wolf meat, and embarked on the road of no return to climb the mountain. A scumbag is a scumbag. Even after following Tang Fan for this period of training, Miss Tao Qingxi barely walked for 2 hours before she began to raise the white flag and surrender. Looking at the gradually thickening clouds in the sky, thinking about the records about Shuoxing in the books of the ancestors of the Zhao family, Tang Fan gritted his teeth and took out his long-forgotten mecha. The moment she saw the mecha, Miss Tao Qingxi was as affectionate as if she saw her own mother. So, even if Tang Fan almost threw her into the mecha, Miss Tao Qingxi didn't mind at all. At least, on the surface, she didn't seem to mind. After all, in this situation of limited energy, having a mecha as a means of transportation is like buying a jackpot. If Tao Qingxi dared to complain about this or that, Tang Fan would definitely take the mecha back without mercy. So, whether she could laugh or not, Tao Qingxi had to laugh. Facing Miss Tao Qingxi's fake smile, Tang Fan sighed and finally started her mecha. The speed of the mecha is naturally much faster than that of a human. Tang Fan and Tao Qingxi walked for 2 hours, but they barely stepped out of the wind-rolling forest. The mecha only drove for a few minutes and came directly to the foot of the mountain from the edge of the wind-rolling forest. Through the display screen, Tao Qingxi clearly saw the emerald green plants. It was precisely because of this that Tao Qingxi, who always behaved lazily and casually, frowned. Afin, stop. Tang Fan stopped his pace and raised his eyebrows. What's wrong? Tao Qingxi pointed to the most common shrub on the screen and said in a deep voice, look at this. Its scientific name is fengmian. It is no different from other evergreen shrubs at ordinary times, but when extreme weather occurs, it will enter a dormant state to save energy. Its large-scale appearance here can only mean one thing. Tang Fan glanced at Tao Qingxi and curled his lips. You are indeed a genius in pharmacy. You react quickly enough. Hearing Tang Fan's words, Tao Qingxi's heart skipped a beat. Does this planet really have extreme weather? Tang Fan did not speak, but turned his head to look at the dark clouds behind him, his face solemn. The rainy season of Shuoxing is coming soon. As a genius in pharmacy, Miss Tao Qingxi immediately played an active role after realizing the seriousness of the matter. Under the guidance of Miss Tao Qingxi, Tang Fan found a foothold on this lush green mountain at the fastest speed. Chapter 366 Plan. Tang Fan and Tao Qingxi had just stepped into the 2-meter square stone cave when the heavy rain began to pour down without mercy. Looking at the rain that had gathered into lines, Tang Fan and Tao Qingxi had solemn expressions. If it was just a sudden downpour, it would be fine. But if it continued on such a rainy day, it would not be so simple. However, the possibility of such a continuous downpour is very high. Tang Fan sighed and murmured, "The speed is still too slow." Tao Qingxi's face turned red all of a sudden. If it weren't for her, Tang Fan would never have fallen into such a situation. It is even possible that he would not have thought of finding a cave to shelter from the rain. Her weak body really held him back. "What do you plan to do when the rain stops later?" Tao Qingxi's voice was a little floating, and it was not difficult to hear that she was guilty. Tang Fan looked at the heavy rain outside and said casually, "I was planning to store some firewood." Tao Qingxi touched the slightly cool ground under her body, feeling the gradually decreasing temperature, and her mouth twitched. "What the hell is firewood?" "Oh, that's right. In the Earth era, people called branches, straw, weeds, etc. that can burn to provide heat firewood. But after entering the interstellar era, everyone uses clean energy, and the word firewood has long been used. If she wasn't knowledgeable, she might not know it." Ms. Tao Qingxi was self-satisfied for a long time before she remembered the purpose of asking Tang Fan this question. She was ready to atone for her mistakes. But looking at the endless rain outside, looking at her delicate body, and thinking about a few potions, Ms. Tao Qingxi couldn't help but back out. "Any other plans?" Tang Fan touched his chin and said, "Maybe, choose a bigger cave." Tao Qingxi laughed dryly and said, "Can't we widen this cave?" Tang Fan looked at her deeply, said nothing, and just reached out and knocked on the stone wall. A crisp knocking sound rang out in the cave, silently telling how hard it was. Tao Qingxi's face suddenly turned red. "It's impossible to expand the cave. It's impossible in this lifetime. Things are getting harder and harder," and Tao Qingxi couldn't help but feel a little discouraged. "Let's just sit here." Tang Fan looked at her fidgeting, then looked at the heavy dark cloud in the sky, and asked, "Besides sitting here, what else can you do, Tao Qingxi?" The two of them sat there for a long time, staring at each other, but the rain didn't stop at all. The water level continued to rise, and soon it submerged the wind-rolling tree forest, leaving only those unripe wind-rolling tree fruits floating on the turbid water. Tao Qingxi looked at the scene in front of him and couldn't help feeling a little scared. If she had not followed Tang Fan's instructions and stayed on the treetop. The scene was so beautiful that Tao Qingxi could not help but shudder just thinking about it. Seeing the same scene, Tang Fan was not afraid, but worried. The water level rose too fast and was not too far from the halfway point where they were. If the rainstorm continued. The scene was so beautiful that Tang Fan could not help but shudder. This rain lasted for a week. The water level kept rising and was only 100 meters away from the cave where they were temporarily staying. When Miss Tao Qingxi realized that something was wrong, the heavy rain finally became a little smaller. Chapter 367 Big Bear. After staring at Miss Tao Qingxi for a week, Tang Fan was about to have mushrooms growing on his body. Although it was still drizzling, Tang Fan, who couldn't sit still, couldn't wait to say hello to Miss Tao Qingxi and ran out. He ran straight to the top of the mountain. After only 700 to 800 meters, Tang Fan found a target. The cave was about 10 square meters, the ground was dry, and the distance from the water line was far enough. Although it was not big, it was much better than the previous one in all aspects. The only shortcoming was probably the big bear sleeping soundly in the cave. Special times require special treatment. Tang Fan held a spear in one hand and a wooden spike in the other, and mercilessly aimed at the big bear and made a dirty move. After hitting it, Tang Fan immediately fled. When the big bear, who was shut even when lying down, opened its eyes after feeling the pain and let out an earth-shaking roar, Tang Fan had already hidden behind a huge rock not far away. When the big bear locked onto Tang Fan's scent and staggered towards her, Tang Fan could not help but groan. "I missed." Tang Fan once again took out a spear from the space buckle, aimed it at the position 5 centimeters below the wound on the big bear's chest, and threw it. The spear turned into a stream of light and headed straight for the big bear's heart. With a muffled sound of the spear piercing the skin, the big bear, which weighed about 400 kilograms, fell to the ground. Tang Fan wiped the rain off her face, dragged the big bear like a hill, and walked towards the stone cave step by step. This big bear is worthy of being a local overlord. The stone cave he chose is spacious and comfortable, dry and warm, and there is even some firewood in the corner. Start the fire, wait for the rain to subside, and take Tao Qingxi over. The two of them will be safe for the time being. Before this thought was finished, Tang Fan's hand pulling her hair paused. No matter how the world changes, whether in the Earth era or the interstellar era, she has never heard of animals hoarding firewood. Ordinary animals don't have it. Star beasts don't have it. Mutated creatures don't have it. She seems to have discovered some incredible secret. Looking at the small pile of dry but not rotten firewood, Tang Fan clenched his back teeth and began to investigate the cave more carefully. But apart from the small pile of firewood, there was nothing else to prove that someone had been here before. Seeing that the rain outside was getting smaller, Tang Fan put aside his entanglement and rushed into the rain again to pick up his friends. Hearing Tang Fan's description, Miss Tao Qingxi didn't care about the drizzle outside and her weak constitution, and dragged Tang Fan to the top of the mountain. When she saw the small pile of firewood with her own eyes, Miss Tao Qingxi couldn't help but shed tears of excitement. After the excitement, Miss Tao Qingxi, who was shivering, did not hesitate to ignite the pile of firewood that proved the existence of human beings. Seeing Miss Tao Qingxi's clean and neat energy, Tang Fan couldn't help but twitch his mouth. With his wet clothes, he rushed into the rain again. The weather on Shuoxing was very strange. It was necessary to dig up some wood and chop it into small pieces to dry while the rain was still light. If the temperature dropped suddenly, Miss Tao Qingxi's small body. Tang Fan couldn't help shaking his head after just thinking about it. The soil layer on the mountain was shallow. After being washed by rain, the overgrown shrubs revealed their loose roots. With just a little digging, they became natural firewood. In just over 10 minutes, 2/3 of the space in the cave was filled with shrubs by Tang Fan. Chapter 368 Bear's Paw. Looking at the bushes in the cave, touching her clothes that had dried thoroughly, Tao Qingxi moved her buttocks and patted her throne. Come and warm up by the fire. We can't afford to get sick in this unfamiliar place. Tang Fan sat down next to Tao Qingxi, wiped the water drops on her face, tugged her wet hair a few times, and hied aside to change into a clean protective suit before sitting next to Tao Qingxi. She was not a weakling like Tao Qingxi, and it didn't matter whether she warmed up by the fire or not. But she couldn't stand wearing dirty protective suits. Miss Tang Fan slowly completed a series of operations such as collecting water, purifying water, and washing protective suits with drinking water. Ms. Tao Qingxi was stunned. Ms. Tao Qingxi looked at the protective suit on her body, which had long been unrecognizable, and then looked at the clean protective suit roasted on the bushes. She felt that she was rough and sloppy, not like a girl at all. But she couldn't do what Tang Fan did. First, she didn't have any extra protective clothing. Second, she didn't have the money to wash clothes with drinking water. So, when Miss Tao Qingxi looked at Tang Fan, her eyes were full of envy. As smart as Tang Fan was, she would not miss it. But it was absolutely impossible for her to give up her only two protective clothing in such a situation of lack of food and clothing. Tang Fan thought about the description of Shuozing by the ancestors of the Zhao family, pursed his lips, took out the dagger and his space buckle, and walked towards the big bear on the side step by step. It was impossible to give up the protective clothing, but it was no problem to make a bear fur coat for Tao Qingxi, a weak chicken, to keep warm. With a wolf fur hat and scarf. It should be enough to deal with the changeable weather on Shuozing. As for when the weather gets hot, Ms. Tao Qingxi's protective clothing, whose color can no longer be seen, should be almost dry. As for before the bear fur coat is done, Ms. Tao Qingxi was afraid that she could only wrap herself in the dirty protective suit and make do with it. While Tang Fan was peeling the bear skin, Ms. Tao Qingxi was not idle either. Using all the tools at hand, she quickly collected the meat of the big bear. Except for the 4 bear paws, all the others were made into nutritional supplements. When Tang Fan finished processing the bear skin, he saw a pile of nutritional supplements and 4 furry bear paws beside Miss Tao Qingxi. Tang Fan rubbed his temples and said in a deep voice, "Bear paws are difficult to cook. You may not be able to eat them in a short time." Tao Qingxi's eyes suddenly lost their light. He said, "Oh," and picked up the nutritional supplements on the side listlessly and drank them bit by bit. Tang Fan pushed his back teeth, processed the 4 bear paws, and put them in a wine jar. No matter how difficult it is to process, it is also food, and it is a top-grade food. There is absolutely no reason to throw it away. When the conditions are ripe, I'll make you braise bear paws." After hearing what Tang Fan said, Miss Tao Qingxi's eyes finally regained their former spirit. As night fell, the rain got heavier again. For dozens of days afterwards, the rain never stopped. The water level rose again and again, and had already submerged the stone cave where they originally lived. Tang Fan and Tao Qingxi both looked a little ugly. What's more, there was a large-scale drop in temperature. When the first snowflake fell, the bearskin coat prepared by Tang Fan was finally worn by Tao Qingxi. The protective suit, whose color could not be seen, finally revealed its beautiful base color after 3 washes and 3 rinses. Looking at the white protective suit on the bushes, Tang Fan couldn't help but twitch the corners of his mouth. Chapter 369, Opening. There were not many bushes left, and Tang Fan cleverly went out to pull some bushes while the snow was not heavy. Tang Fan stopped only when the stone cave was filled with bushes inside and out. When Tang Fan came back, Miss Tao Qingxi was still wrapped in a bearskin coat, a wolfskin hat and a scarf, wrapping herself up like a ball, shivering by the fire. Tao Qingxi tightened her bearskin coat, frowned at the snowflakes outside, and thought that life on Yuanxing was hard enough, but she didn't expect that life on Shuoxing was not easy either. As a weakling, she could do nothing in this cold weather. She also clearly realized that the only way for her to help Tang Fan the most was to do nothing. That talented girl could live well no matter where she went. But she, in the end, was still a drag. I'm old now, and my body is not as strong as before. I overestimated myself after all. Tao Qingxi's voice was filled with a sigh, which made Tang Fan feel sour. Why are you saying this for no reason? Didn't you get soaked by the rain a few days ago? If someone else said this, Tao Qingxi might be annoyed. But when Tang Fan said this, Tao Qingxi was not annoyed, but felt something else in her heart. You are the only one in the world who dares to say that I'm stupid in front of me. Are you too arrogant, or do you think I can't handle the potion? Tang Fan glanced at her and sneered. You went through so much trouble to come to this remote place to commit suicide. How can you be so depressed? Tao Qingxi and Tang Fan started to argue with each other. Although he was several decades older, Tao Qingxi was really no match for Tang Fan in terms of verbal skills, and was finally blocked by Tang Fan and could not speak. But the building was crooked after all. The discomfort in Miss Tao Qingxi's heart had long been eliminated in the argument. When Tang Fan and Tao Qingxi were busy arguing, they did not notice that a huge hole was torn in the sky above Yuanxing. A group of people fell from the huge hole like dumplings. Just like Tang Fan and Tao Qingxi who fell to Yuanxing a few days ago, those who fell to the ground also closed their eyes and were unconscious. It was a pity that they did not have the good luck of Tang Fan and Tao Qingxi. The timing of their fall was not a little bit worse than that of Tang Fan and Tao Qingxi. Among them, Major General Song Si, who was the first to wake up, was actually awakened by the cold touch of the sand python crawling over his body. Of course, he was not the worst. The worst was Emil Field, the business tycoon, who was awakened by the sting of a poisonous scorpion. It was painful, and wasting an antidote was within the tolerance range, but it was embarrassing, especially in front of Song Si and others. Mr. Emil Field was somewhat unable to accept it. Even though there were animals everywhere, especially the sounds of star beasts, Mr. Emil Field still firmly drew a line between himself and Song Si and others. Song Si did not agree with Emil Field's behavior of being so stubborn that he would suffer in life, but he would not make sarcastic remarks. Song Si did not like Emil Field much, but he was not on the most hated blacklist. It was not terrible to be disgusted with each other. It was better to show it clearly than to stab someone in the back. Chapter 370 Next door. Even though it was already dark, Emil Field, who was always in good physical condition, did not miss Song Si's eyes. That look was slightly defensive and a little bit disgusted. Emil Field, who had always been smooth sailing, had never been treated like this before. But thinking that the reason why the person on the other side was stranded on this strange planet was more or less related to him, he was too embarrassed to say it. The whole night, the two sides confronted each other like this, and no one dared to close their eyes. When the sky was bright, the gully-filled yellow land and turbid water of Yuanxing appeared in front of Song Si and Emil Field little by little, and the expressions of both of them were not very good. Emil Field was the first to curse. What the hell is this place? Unlike Emil Field's disgust and complaints, Song Si calmly accepted this fact and arranged the task at hand as quickly as possible. The name of the expeditionary force is not exaggerated. Song Si's personal soldiers were even better. Before Emil Field finished complaining, the scouts sent by Song Si to the northwest came to report to Song Si with the rotten remains of the sand python. Song Si looked at the neatly dismembered sand python, clicked his tongue, and poked his back teeth. Take me to see, Song Si was surprised to see that in addition to the remains of the sand python and various household garbage, there were obvious signs of human survival in the cave not far away. Considering the pile of things Qin Yi sent him, combined with his life experience for so many years, all of this was done by Tang Fan and the pharmacist named Tao Qingxi. In this place where there is nothing but a northwest wind, she seems to have taken good care of herself and the woman named Tao Qingxi. He was completely beyond his expectations. The little girl who knew nothing had grown to this point without him noticing. Song Si's heart was filled with a kind of relief that only an old father would have. The child has grown up and become sensible. What Tang Fan can do, Song Si, the Major General, with a group of professionals, can naturally do. What Tang Fan can think of, Song Si, the Major General, can naturally think of. Under the leadership of Song Si, the group of people soon found the Shuoxing not far away. Unfortunately, the Shuo day had just passed, and the two planets were too far apart, so they could only watch and could not do anything. Song Si and others could only set up camp on Yuanxing and wait for the arrival of the next Shuo day. And Tang Fan on the Shuoxing next door was also waiting. Waiting for the snowfall to stop, and waiting for the temperature of Shuoxing to rise. Only when the weather gets warmer can she end the days of staring at Miss Tao Qingxi, and can she get busy and not think about those people and things far away. Yes, Miss Tang Fan, who is smart and strong, is so useless on this cold day. She misses home. She misses home when she is warming herself by the fire, when she is drinking nutritional supplements, when she is sleeping, when she is watching Tao Qingxi sleeping soundly but can't fall asleep herself. She misses Tang Gang, Tang Si, Zhao Jingshu, Qin Yi. When she is bored, she even takes out Song Si and thinks about it. But Tang Fan doesn't know that Major General Song Si, whom she misses, is now on the next planet. Chapter 371 Face. Although the two sides were on the next planet, it was not easy to meet. Song Si led his men to the Yuanxing in the northwest wind, while Tang Fan and Miss Tao Qingxi braved the snow and wind, roasted by the fire, and waited for the weather to clear up. This wait lasted for half a month. When Song Si led his men to cross the shortest distance between the two planets, the snow and wind that had lasted for more than half a month just stopped. Tang Fan, who went out for some fresh air, heard the noise and rushed over. He happened to see the historical scene of the omnipotent Major General Song Si falling flat on his face for the first time in his life. The scene was so beautiful that Tang Fan couldn't help but laugh out loud. Laughter is like onychomycosis, one infection spreads to two. Most of the officers and soldiers under Song Si were barely holding back, but Field was not polite to Song Si at all and laughed out loud without mercy. Tang Fan had a special status. For the sake of his two elders and Tang Gang, Major General Song Si could not do anything to him. But Song Si had no reason to be polite to Field. Before Field could close his mouth, he saw a white light coming straight towards the knee joint of his mecha. Before he could react, the mecha became lame, and both the man and the mecha fell on the ice and slid a long way. Tang Fan didn't even give face to Song Si, let alone Field, and immediately laughed like a pig. This time the laughter was even more contagious, and some people who could hold back just now couldn't hold back their laughter at this moment. On the contrary, the little guy who was laughing so hard just now suddenly became steady at this moment. Song Si jumped out of the mecha neatly, put away the mecha immediately, walked in front of Tang Fan, and gave her a brain-crushing blow. It's already this late, and you're still laughing? Do you know that in order to find you, the two of us, the three of you, and the group of people you know from the Blue Sea Mecha Academy and the Alliance Military Academy almost overturned the Alliance? Tang Fan rubbed his head and laughed dryly. Didn't I leave a letter for Qin Yi? Song Si looked at Tang Fan's refusal to repent, and was so angry that he gave her another brain crash. What did you leave behind? Don't you know? What's the difference between leaving those things and not leaving anything? Tang Fan sighed and said coldly, if I didn't leave anything, would you be able to find this place? Song Si was at a loss for words for once. Before he could speak, Tang Fan frowned and continued, I went missing, and they almost overturned the Alliance. You, the son of a marshal, a major general of the Alliance, are missing. When Song Si heard this, his expression became even uglier. It's all to find you, there's nothing wrong with this. But Tang Fan didn't like it. Major General Song, I don't think we know each other very well, you don't have to come. Major General Song Si, who always had smooth sailing, had never been so disliked before. And in front of so many people. Almost in an instant, Major General Song Si performed a long-lost skill for Tang Fan, face changing. From sword eyebrows and star eyes, dragon and phoenix posture, looking around with high spirits, to face as red as the bottom of a pot, embarrassed and furious, it was only a sentence away. Even Song Tong, who had followed Song Si for so many years, couldn't help but sigh. I never knew that someone could have such a big impact on Aussie. More than half of the people present couldn't help but nod in agreement. Looking at this group of nodding subordinates, Major General Song Si's face became even darker. Doesn't the dignified Alliance Major General have any face? If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 372 Command. Although the snow stopped, it was not a good thing for Song Si and others. It was not cold when it snowed, but it was cold when the snow melted. On days when the snow melted, the entire Shuo Star was very cold. It was even worse in the mountains. But apart from the mountains, most of Shuo Star was flooded, and there was no more suitable place to live. The stone cave where Tang Fan and Tao Qingxi lived temporarily was only more than 10 square meters, and it was impossible to accommodate so many people at the same time. Therefore, Song Si and others consciously divided into 3 groups. A small number of people went into rest, and the rest were divided into 2 groups, one to guard and the other to find a stone cave where they could live temporarily. The people on Emilfield's side were not so lucky. They had no right to rest, so everyone became scouts, looking for a temporary place to stay. Hard work pays off. Before dark, both sides found their targets. The base found by Song Si's people was slightly closer to Tang Fan's temporary residence, but the area was not large. Although the place found by Emil and others was large, it was a little far from Tang Fan's temporary residence. In fact, the cave where Emil and his men were staying was first discovered by Song Si's men. However, Song Si gave up without hesitation. Major General Song Si, who had rested in the cave where Tang Fan was staying for a while, knew clearly that caves were better if they were smaller. Especially in this cold night, when firewood and other things were not fully prepared, this was even more so. So, after choosing the cave, he shamelessly moved some firewood from Tang Fan and burned it for a while longer. The cave, which was only more than 10 square meters, immediately became warm. The caves on both sides were slightly divided, and Song Si and his more than 20 people were happily settled there. As a major general of the alliance, Song Si was well aware of the principle that a person who is not evil-minded is not a ruthless character. Taking away Tang Fan's firewood was not enough. This guy used the excuse that Tang Fan was more familiar with shuoxing, and simply gave the command to Tang Fan. Looking at Song Si's shameless face, Tang Fan couldn't help but twitch the corners of his mouth. After receiving the command, Tang Fan issued the first task, which was to send the team led by Major General Song Si to go out to find firewood and food. It is impossible to live off the land. It is impossible in this life. Unexpectedly, Song Si actually went. He went. When the stars first came up, Song Si really came back triumphantly with a few bundles of shrubs and 5 brown wolves. Seeing Song Si's boastful look, Tang Fan couldn't help it. The young lady first performed a trick of how to quickly use shrubs to make a door curtain to shock the soldiers led by Major General Song Si. Then, she performed a highlight of skinning wolf skin alive. There was silence in the cave. Everyone looked at the wolf skin in the hands of Miss Tang Fan, and then looked at the bear fur coat, wolf fur hat and scarf on Miss Tao Qingxi. Everyone's eyes were not right. Miss Tao Qingxi didn't notice it at all. She consciously picked up the wolf meat that Tang Fan had cut off and made nutrient supplements quickly. That night, all the officers and soldiers under Major General Song Si looked at the nutrition in their hands and the wolf skin hanging on the wall. And they were a little bit unable to swallow. Only Song Si, Song Tong, Tang Fan, and Tao Qingxi looked normal. Not far away, sitting in a ventilated cave, Emil wrapped in a blanket, looked at the warm, orange light in the 2 caves, listened to their talking and laughing, and his back teeth were about to break. We are all human beings, why are there so many differences? Chapter 373 Shit Luck. After a long while, Emilfield muttered in a low voice, I don't know what kind of shit luck that kid has. Not only did he have a good birth, but he also met such a cheap sister. Even if he was dragged into the transmission matrix and came to this point today, he was not the least bit embarrassed. Just thinking about it, I can become a lemon. Emelfield sighed and silently wrapped his quilt tightly. Feeling Emelfield's envious and jealous eyes, Songsi felt a sense of satisfaction from the bottom of his heart. What does no comparison, no happiness mean? Songsi finally understood today. The people who stayed behind to watch the night slept soundly. Of course, if some people didn't snore or grind their teeth, everyone would be more satisfied. After just a night's rest, when they woke up the next day, they were surprised to find that the moon had changed. The snow on the mountain melted overnight, revealing bushes, grass and moss, and the ground turned from silver to green. The thick ice at the foot of the mountain also had numerous cracks, and it was basically impossible for people to stand. Emelfield was unwilling to give up and asked someone to try. As soon as he put one foot on it, he heard a crisp sound on the ice surface, and the place where he stepped on immediately showed spider web-like cracks. The warrior was so scared that he immediately retracted his legs and looked at Emelfield with rejection in his eyes. Seeing that Emelfield was still hesitant, Tang Fan couldn't help but intervene. The wooden stick in his hand slightly applied force on the center of the crack, and the ice immediately scattered and floated in the cold water. There was also a large piece of white in the ice. Tang Fan didn't care about Emelfield's expression, and the wooden stick in his hand once again touched the ice surface. The moment the ice sank, the white finally floated up. Tang Fan gently picked up the wooden stick in her hand, and a fruit of the wind-rolling tree fell steadily into her hand. Looking at the wind-rolling tree fruit in her hand, Tang Fan's mouth corners unconsciously rose slightly. The fruit of the tumble tree is a good thing. Whether it is used as a nutrient or firewood, it is the best choice. She raised the fruit of the tumble tree in her hand to Songsi and said with a smile, "Major General Song, get to work." As a Major General of the Alliance, Songsi has a lot of experience. But this thing in Tang Fan's hand is also the first time he has seen it. Although he doesn't know what it is worth Tang Fan's joy. Songsi thinks that it must be a good thing. So, before Tang Fan can say the second sentence, he immediately organized his men to follow suit and pick up the fruit of the tumble tree. Seeing that Tang Fan and Songsi were busy, Emelfield was afraid that he would suffer a loss, and he threw himself into the great cause of picking up the fruit of the tumble tree. The people on both sides are the elites in their respective teams, and their mobility is naturally very strong. When the slowly rising sun melted the gradually thinning ice layer, the white fruit of the tumble tree floated to the surface, and the target became more and more obvious. In just 2 hours, the hillside was densely packed with tumbler fruit. Seeing that there were fewer and fewer tumbler fruit in the water, and it was becoming more and more difficult to salvage them, Tang Fan finally waved his hand and stopped this vigorous activity. String the tumbler fruit together and let the sun exert its power to make them dry and soft. Ms. Tao Kingxi, who was afraid of the cold, walked out of the cave and began her performance. Everyone now understood some of the uses of tumbler fruit. There was no shortage of pharmacists on both sides. Although they were not necessarily as good as Ms. Tao Kingxi, they could still make nutrient supplements. Before noon, the nutrient supplements with the flavor of tumbler fruit soon came out and became lunch for everyone. Chapter 374 Aftertaste. Songsi looked at the tumbleweed-flavored nutritional supplement that everyone had, and raised his eyebrows. He walked behind Tang Fan and said, "You did it on purpose." Tang Fan glanced at him. "Really?" Songsi nodded. "Don't be too obvious." Looking at Songsi's sure expression, Tang Fan couldn't help but start to doubt himself. Is her acting so bad? Looking at Tang Fan's little movements, Major General Songsi couldn't help but laugh out loud. Tang Fan realized that this guy wasn't so sure, and was completely deceiving her. But she let Songsi's deception succeed. Tang Fan squeezed out 2 words from his teeth with difficulty, "cunning." Songsi was not ashamed, but proud of it, and said with a smile, "Little girl, IQ advantage, you know. As far as I know, you are not a good person. Tao Kingxi's position is the same as yours, and she is very good at potions. You can still accept her. But Emelfield is not related to you, and there are even some grudges. Not only did you not instigate me to kill him, but you also gave me some advice from time to time." Songsi said this. What else could Tang Fan say? Except silence, still silence. Songsi didn't intend to let her go, and asked with a smile, "Is there anything you want to explain to me?" Tang Fan looked around and didn't say anything. Songsi sighed, pulled her and walked a few steps, until there was no one around, then stopped. "Now, You can talk." Although there was no one around, Tang Fan still didn't speak, but silently took out a notebook from the space buckle. Song Si took it and read it quickly. The more he read, the more serious his expression became. "Where did you get this thing?" Tang Fan pursed his lips and uttered two words, "Zhao family." Song Si's mind turned and he sighed deeply. The little girl was a person who valued friendship and loyalty. If others treated her well, she would repay them tenfold. Tang Fan was different about the Zhao family grandfather and grandson who had been friends in need. She regarded old man Zhao Jiang as her teacher and Zhao Fan as her friend. Even the people around her, including Song Si, looked up to this grandfather and grandson. How much deep friendship was given in the past, how much pain it was now. Tang Fan was like this, and so was Song Si. Maybe, this was just an accident. Song Si's voice was very light, with a bit of comforting meaning. But he didn't know whether this was to coax Tang Fan or himself. Tang Fan opened his computer, called up a document, and placed it in front of Song Si, smiling bitterly. "I don't want to admit this fact either." Song Si turned his head and glanced at the screen on Tang Fan's computer. It was a stack of planet transfer details belonging to Tang Fan. At first glance, there was no difference from thousands of planet transfer details. But under Tang Fan's guidance, after carefully studying the transfers, Song Si finally figured it out. Among the planets owned by Tang Fan, 80% of the sellers have the same surname. Although they are not surnamed Zhao, Tang Fan and Song Si don't believe that they have nothing to do with the Zhao family and old man Zhao Jiang. Seeing this, Song Si couldn't help but smile bitterly like Tang Fan. "When did you find out?" Tang Fan sat down on the ground and confessed honestly, "When I found the fruit of the tumbleweed tree on Yuansing, I connected the whole thing. As for the ownership of the planet, I only figured it out when I was trapped in the cave and got bored." Chapter 375 Everyone Understands. Song Si sat down next to her and said in a deep voice, "What are you going to do now?" Tang Fan smiled bitterly and said, "It's useless to think about anything now. We have to wait until we get back to talk about everything." This made sense, and Major General Song Si was speechless. For a moment, Major General Song's big eyes were full of doubts. "You have made up your mind. Why did you pull him aside? Didn't you see the gossiping eyes of those guys who were full?" It doesn't matter to him as a grown man, but it's so bad for a little girl to be misunderstood at such a young age. The most important thing is that after being misunderstood, he still has to explain to Marshal Song Yuanqi and Major General Tang Gang. Thinking of that scene, Song Si felt trembling. Seeing Song Si shivering, Tang Fan couldn't help but frowning. "Supplies are scarce here, don't get sick." When Song Si heard this, his eyes widened. Just when he was about to tell her about it, he remembered the other identity of this little girl in front of him, a mecha and starship foundry engineer who deals with ore. Moreover, at a young age, she has already reached the level of a mecha and starship foundry engineer who looks down on everyone and dominates the alliance in terms of professional ability. Looking around, the one who can understand the booklet in his hand and determine the amount and properties of ore on the planet with just the naked eye is this little girl in front of him. Keep a distance from this girl? Impossible. At least it is impossible now. In this case, why avoid suspicion? Anyway, I have to explain it, so I might as well save my saliva and face Marshal Song Yuanqi and Major General Tang Gang. After figuring this out, Song Si immediately grabbed Tang Fan in one hand and the booklet she got from the Zhao family in the other hand, and analyzed and studied the booklet that Tang Fan got from the Zhao family. Excluding the planets that Tang Fan bought in the alliance, and deducting the Yuansing and Shuaxing that they have already visited, there are still 13 planets described in this booklet. Among them, there are no planets without minerals and special landscapes. Thinking about the experience of Yuansing and Shuaxing, Song Si and Tang Fan's expressions are not very good. Going home is not easy. But for Marshal Song Yuanqi, for Ms. Yao, for Major General Tang Gang, can they give up? The answer is, of course, impossible. The two looked at each other and smiled bitterly. Then, resigned to their fate, they began to plan the route and respond. When the two finally finished talking, whether it was the officers and soldiers under Song Si, or Emil Field's group, and even Ms. Tao Kingxi, they began to look at them with a wrong look. It was not until this time that Tang Fan understood why Song Si, the energetic young man, suddenly shuddered. Tang Fan wanted to say something, but when she met everyone's eyes that said "You don't have to say it, I understand," Tang Fan, who is always eloquent, couldn't say a word at this moment. Miss Tang Fan felt aggrieved for the first time in her life. She was so angry that she didn't say a word for 3 consecutive days, and she kept a distance of more than 3 meters from Major General Song Si. Major General Song Si, who was gossiped about and imagined by everyone and kept a distance from the little sister, was calm on the surface and accepted the result indifferently. However, the little brothers codenamed Monkey and Sand Scorpion, who were the most enthusiastic and winking, had their workload doubled for no reason. Only God and the earth knew that Major General Song and the two of them knew. Revenge for the slightest grievance has always been a fine tradition of the Song family. Revenge must be taken in time, which is Major General Song Si's motto. Everyone understands. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.